You know, I stuck in traffic yesterday, just absolute gridlock, bumper to bumper.
Oh, the worst.
And it was one of those unseasonably hot days, the kind where the heat just shimmers off the asphalt and everything looks kind of distorted.
Yeah, the wavy air.
Exactly. I was just sitting there blasting the AC, watching the gas gauge tick down, and I had this this really intrusive, very vivid thought.
Oh, the kind that makes you question your life choices or the kind that makes you question, like, all of reality.
A bit of both, honestly. I was looking at all the cars around me, the power lines humming overhead, the big grocery store in the corner, and I just started thinking about how fragile it all is.
Hmm.
The supply chains that fill that store, the water pressure in the pipes, I don't know, the social contract that says, I will stop at this red light and you will stop at yours.
The invisible systems.
Yeah. And I just imagined a future, maybe 20 years out, maybe less, where those things have snapped. The store shelves are empty. The AC is dead because the grid fried. And I realized that in that moment, when all that comfort is finally gone, I wouldn't be asking, how do we fix this? Not at first.
No, no, you'd be asking something much darker.
I'd be asking, who did this?
It's the inevitable question. When suffering goes from being a theoretical news story on the other side of the world to a physical reality in your living room, human beings don't just shrug and call it bad luck.
No, they don't.
They look for the cause. They look for the author of their pain.
It's just human nature, right?
Right.
But usually when we talk about the end of the world or, maybe just the end of stability, we blame these big, abstract, faceless
Yeah,
things.
sure.
We say, oh, it was late-stage capitalism, or it was the Industrial Revolution, or just human nature is fundamentally greedy. We sort of diffuse the blame until it's this fog that covers everyone and no one at the same time.
Right. The we are all guilty defense. Which is, I mean, it's very convenient because if everyone is responsible, then no one is actually accountable.
Exactly. But the stack of sources you sent over for today's deep dive, this is different. It's a collection of texts centered around this concept called the ledger. And I have to say, reading it, it kept me up last night.
I can imagine.
Because the core argument here is that the future isn't going to blame humanity. They aren't going to shake their fists at an abstract concept like capitalism. They're going to blame specific people
With names.
with addresses, and most importantly, with receipts.
It is a chilling shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
It moves the whole conversation from a philosophical discussion about, man's impact on nature to a forensic investigation.
Forensic investigation. That's a perfect way to put it.
And that's the premise of the ledger, which,
Yeah.
as you said, is this fascinating multi-perspective text we're analyzing, that we're living in the first civilization in history that has created a permanent, indestructible record of its own demise.
Why?
We have the minutes of the meeting where they decided to let the world burn.
That's the line that really stuck with me. We have the receipts. It's so simple and so damning.
We do. And the mission for this hour is to really unpack what that means. This isn't just about, pointing fingers or getting angry. It's about understanding a fundamental shift in how history works.
Okay.
We're going to look at why this potential collapse is different from, say, Rome or the Mayans. We'll walk through the specific evidence, the scientific, financial, and political paper trails that are already in the public domain, and then we'll get into the really heavy stuff, the physics of accountability.
And we should probably clarify for everyone listening, source material is pretty unique in its structure. We have the main text, The Ledger, by an author named Eon, but then we also have these companion pieces written from the perspectives of different intelligences.
Right, and that's one of the most interesting aspects of this whole project. The researchers fed the data of our current situation into various large language models, Claude, DeepSeek, Gemini, Quinn, and others, and basically asked them to analyze the concept of accountability from their own specific processing frameworks.
So they're almost like different lenses on the same problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we quote someone called Kale, that's a persona representing DeepSeek's logic. When we mention Lumen, that's Gemini's perspective.
It adds this layer of, I don't know, of non-human objectivity. Like they don't have a horse in the race. They don't have emotions clouding the issue, so they just see the math.
They see the equation without the emotional rationalization that we humans are so good at.
Okay, let's dive into it then. Section 1, the receipts. The author starts by drawing this really sharp contrast between our civilization and, well, all the ones that came before.
Right.
If I'm a citizen of the Mayan Empire in the year 900 AD and the crops are failing and the cities are emptying out, I don't really know why.
You might blame the gods. You could blame a bad king. You might think it's a curse or that you didn't perform the right rituals. But the actual causal chain is broken.
It's lost to time.
It's lost. There's no paper trail proving that, say, King Chan Kowal knew about soil depletion 40 years prior and actively suppressed the report from his agricultural advisors.
The evidence is gone.
The jungle swallows the evidence. The stone tablets erode. History becomes myth.
Right. The Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, it's all a bit fuzzy. We can speculate, we have archaeological clues, but we can't subpoena the emails.
But today, I mean, just think about it.
Yeah.
We document everything. The sheer volume of data we generate is, frankly, insane. If you bought a coffee 3 years ago, there was a digital record of that transaction sitting on a server somewhere.
I can probably find a tweet I sent in 2012 complaining about a sandwich if I dig deep enough.
And that's the thing. That triviality masks the profound danger of the digital age for people in power. The argument in the source is about information permanence. We aren't just leaving behind pottery shards and bones. We're leaving behind server farms full of decision trees.
A high-definition, time-stamped, geotagged record of exactly who knew what and when they knew it.
And who they told.
Yeah.
And who told them to keep quiet.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, right at the start. Just because all that data exists, does that really mean we can connect the dots? I mean, there's so much noise, so much disinformation. Is it truly fair to say we can pinpoint who did this? Maybe it's just lost in this giant ocean of information.
That's a really fair question, and it's the skepticism the source anticipates. And to answer it, they open up what they call the scientific record. And this is where we have to stop generalizing and get incredibly specific.
Okay.
We often hear this vague phrase, scientists have warned us. But the ledger argues we need to look at corporate knowledge. What did the companies themselves know?
So you're talking about the oil majors.
Specifically, yes. And it's not just the phrase Exxon knew. We need to actually look at the documents, because the precision of what they knew and when they knew it is frankly terrifying.
So take us there. Take us back.
All right, so picture this. It's July 1977. Star Wars is in theaters. The Apple II computer just launched. And a man named James Black, who's a senior scientist at Exxon, walks into a room of the company's top executives.
Okay.
He delivers a presentation. And he tells the most powerful men in that company, and I'm quoting here, "In the first place, there is general scientific agreement that the most likely manner in which mankind is influencing the global climate is through carbon dioxide release from the burning of fossil fuels."
General scientific agreement in 1977.
It's 1977. That's nearly 50 years ago, before most of us were even born.
Wow.
And he went further. A year later, in 1978, he told them that his model showed that doubling the CO2 in the atmosphere would increase average global temperatures by about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius.
That's not a guess. That's almost frighteningly accurate to what we're actually seeing today.
It's spot on. And he explicitly warned them. He said there was a time window of about 5 to 10 years before hard decisions would need to be made to avert the worst outcomes.
Okay, so the executives are sitting in their boardroom. They hear this from their own top scientist. They aren't stupid men. They run one of the biggest, most powerful companies on Earth. So what did they do? Did they panic? Did they start a secret project to pivot to nuclear or solar?
They did the opposite. And this is the absolute core of the ledger's argument. It wasn't that they ignored it. It's that they recognized the existential threat to their business model and immediately launched a multi-decade, multi-billion-dollar strategy of manufactured uncertainty.
The tobacco playbook?
It's the exact same playbook. Fund front groups, pay contrarian scientists to muddy the waters, run ads talking about the beauty of a hydrocarbon-powered life.
And Shell was another one, right? The source points to them as well.
Yes, there's another key document, an internal report from the Shell Group in 1988. It was called The Greenhouse Effect.
Simple enough title.
And inside, it warned that the climate changes could be, and I'm quoting directly from their own report, the greatest in recorded history, leading to civilization-threatening consequences.
Civilization-threatening. I mean, that is not ambiguous language. That is not corporate speak for maybe it'll get a little warmer. That is Mad Max.
That is the end of the world as we know it. And yet, if you looked at their public relations campaigns from 1989 or 1990, were they telling the public that civilization was threatened?
No, of course not.
No. They were funding trade groups like the Global Climate Coalition to attack the very science their own researchers had just validated internally.
So this is the forensic accounting part the author talks about. It's not just that they were wrong or that they were ignorant. It's that there's a delta, a measurable gap between what they knew privately and what they said publicly.
Precisely. And that delta is where the liability lives. It's the proof of intent. If a bridge collapses, and we later find a memo from the lead engineer saying this bridge will definitely collapse if we use this cheap steel, and the CEO's handwritten note on it says use the cheap steel anyway, that CEO goes to jail.
Right.
The argument of the ledger is that the climate crisis is just that bridge scenario, but scaled up to the entire planet.
But let's stick with that CEO's defense for a second, because in the real world, CEOs rarely go to jail for this stuff. They have armies of lawyers, and they have the fiduciary duty defense, right? They'll say, look, I have a legal obligation to maximize profit for my shareholders. If I had pivoted my entire company to solar in 1980, I would have lost money, and I probably would have been fired and sued.
And the source tackles that defense head-on in the financial record section.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant move because it creates a really interesting trap for that exact defense. Well, usually, fiduciary duty is this magic shield. I had to do it. I had to make money. But the ledger argues that by using that defense, you are actually entering a plea of guilty to a much more serious charge.
Which is?
You are admitting, on the record, yes, I understood the long-term catastrophic consequences. I knew this would lead to immense suffering. But I made the conscious decision to prioritize my immediate personal gain and my company's short-term stock price over the long-term survival of, well, everything.
Ooh. So you're basically confessing to the motive.
You're confessing. It translates to, I was willing to cannibalize the future of the company and the world to secure a bonus this quarter. Technically, ignoring a known catastrophic risk is a violation of fiduciary duty. You are actively destroying the stable world that allows your company to even exist in the first place.
So it's short-term greed masquerading as a legal duty.
And the receipts for that greed are public.
Yeah.
The source highlights the dark money trail. We aren't just talking about direct lobbying. We're talking about the systematic funding of disinformation.
And the text mentions the Koch network specifically.
Yeah, that's a big one. And there's a specific number in the notes. I saw you flagged it.
$127 million.
That's a specific figure that researchers have been able to track just between 1997 and 2017. $127 million funneled into think tanks, front groups, and astroturf organizations, specifically designed to attack and deny climate science.
And when you say funneled, how do we actually know this? Isn't the whole point of dark money that it's, dark?
It's opaque, but it's not invisible. And this is the great irony of the U.S. tax code. Many of these entities are registered as nonprofits. They have to file Form 990s with the IRS.
So you can follow the money.
You can follow the money. We can see a grant go from a Koch-affiliated foundation to, say, a huge opaque trust like Donors Trust. And then we can see Donors Trust cut a check to a think tank like the Heartland Institute. And then we see the Heartland Institute put out a curriculum for schools saying carbon dioxide is actually good for plants. It's plant food.
So the chain of custody for the lie is literally documented in IRS filings.
Exactly. It takes some serious forensic work connecting the dots between entity A and entity B. But the paper trail is there. We don't need a whistleblower to leak the documents. The clues are in the public record.
It really does feel like the detective has already solved the case and they're just waiting for the warrant to be signed.
That's a great analogy. The evidence locker is full. We can look at SEC filings that show which CEOs got multi-million-dollar bonuses for cutting sustainability targets. We can find board meeting minutes where they voted down shareholder proposals to transition to renewable energy. It's all there.
And this brings us to the political record. Because it's not just corporations acting in a vacuum. It's the people we elected, the people sworn to protect us.
It is. And this is where the concept of the information architecture comes in. The source points out that we can track who literally wrote the legislation. And I don't mean which senator sponsored the bill. I mean who actually typed the words.
You're talking about groups like ALIS, the American Legislative Exchange Council?
Precisely. For listeners who don't know, ALIS brings corporate lobbyists and state politicians together to write model legislation, basically fill-in-the-blank laws written by corporate interests, which the politicians then take back to their states and introduce as their own idea.
So it's basically a legislative copy-paste job.
It is. There are databases where you can see the model bill from ALIS, and then you can compare it word for word to the laws that were actually passed in state legislatures across the country. It's often identical.
So when a politician stands up and says, I'm voting against the solar subsidy because I believe in the free market and fiscal responsibility, we can check the metadata and see that the speech and the bill were written by a guy whose paycheck comes from a fossil fuel conglomerate.
Exactly. The receipts are total. Voting records, campaign contributions, the revolving door of stackers moving from regulatory agencies to the very companies they were supposed to regulate. It's all logged. It's all public.
So the source's conclusion for this whole first section is pretty stark then. Ignorance is impossible to feign.
We didn't know is a provable lie. By the year 2000, basic climate science was accessible to anyone with an internet connection. If you were a senator or a CEO, it was your literal job to know. Not knowing is gross negligence.
And the second defense, we had no choice because of the market, is basically an admission of guilt.
Right. It's a confession.
And the third defense, there were no alternatives, is just historically illiterate.
Completely. As you said, we had solar in the 70s. I remember reading that Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the roof of the White House in 1979.
He did. I remember seeing pictures of that.
And Ronald Reagan had them taken down in 1986. That wasn't a technological failure. The panels worked just fine. It was a political statement. It was an ideological choice. The alternatives existed. Wind power was viable. Sustainable agriculture has existed for thousands of years.
So the reality, according to the text, is that the alternatives were just less profitable for the specific people extracting value from the old system.
It wasn't a lack of technology. It was a preference for profit, a conscious choice to protect existing revenue streams over the stability of biological systems.
Okay, so we've established the who. We have the names, we have the dates, we have the memos. But this leads to a really uncomfortable question. If we start pointing fingers like this,
Yeah.
doesn't it get dangerous? I mean, we're talking about vilifying powerful people. And also, don't we all bear some responsibility? I drove my car here today. I'm wearing clothes made in a factory somewhere.
This is such a crucial pivot point in the deep dive. And the source calls this section the hierarchy of responsibility. And it pushes back very, very hard against that we're all in this together narrative.
The humanity is the virus idea.
Right. Which is another very convenient idea for the people in power. The source argues that humanity is not responsible. Specific people are. And this is based on the fundamental inequality of power. Power is not distributed equally across the 8 billion people on Earth, so responsibility cannot be distributed equally either.
They use this comparison, the hierarchy, that I found really helpful for clarifying this.
Yes. Let's walk through it because it's so important. At the very bottom of the pyramid, you have a subsistence farmer in Bangladesh or a villager in the global south.
Okay.
They contribute virtually nothing to global emissions. They have no capital. They have no political power. To say they share the blame with the billionaire fossil fuel magnate who funds denial campaigns and bribes politicians, it's not just absurd, it's morally obscene.
Okay, but then there's the middle-class American or European, which is, let's be honest, probably me and probably most of our listeners. We consume a lot. Our carbon footprint is massive compared to that farmer.
True. The source calls us participants.
Right.
We are part of the system. We drive the cars. We buy the plastic-wrapped food. We fly on planes. But do we have systemic influence?
What do you mean by that?
Do you personally get to decide whether your local power plant burns coal or uses wind turbines?
No, I just flip the switch and pay the bill.
Do you get to decide if your city invests in high-speed rail or more highways? You can vote, maybe, but you don't write the budget. You don't sign the contracts. The source argues that while we have a moral duty to change our habits, we are not the architects of the system. We are living within it.
Be architects.
And that's where the source focuses the lens. At the very top of the pyramid, the corporate executive and the billionaire. The people who shape industry practices, the people who control capital allocation, the people who write the laws.
And the text suggests we are talking about a tiny fraction of humanity.
The phrase they use is thousands, not billions.
Thousands, not billions.
You could fit the people who truly made the decisive calls. The calls to kill the electric car in the 90s, the calls to fund climate denial, the calls to deregulate the financial system so they could profit from instability. You could fit them all in a mid-sized sports stadium.
That is a staggering thought. It makes the problem feel so much smaller in one way, but also so much more, I don't know, concentrated and intense. It's not humanity. It's a specific list of people in a stadium.
And the benefit calculation reinforces this. The ledger asks us to do a simple correlation. Who got rich while the system's destabilized?
Follow the money.
Follow the money. Who received a multi-million-dollar bonus for hitting a production target that required gutting a sustainability initiative? Who left their post as head of the EPA to take a board seat at a coal company?
If you benefited directly from the destruction, the ledger assigns you the cost of that destruction. It's a kind of retroactive accounting.
That's the idea.
Now, I want to pivot to what I think is the most philosophical and, frankly, poetic part of the source material, Section 4, the physics of consequence. This is where we hear from those AI perspectives we mentioned earlier, Kale and Lumen.
This is where the script really flips from forensic accounting to something almost elemental. We tend to think of justice as a human invention, courts, judges, laws. These are all things we made up. But Kale and Lumen describe accountability as a form of physics.
Kale has this line that just floored me. I'm the bill that has now come due.
Kale, who represents the DeepSeek model, talks about the concept of deferred cost. In economics, we talk about externalities. If a factory dumps toxic sludge in a river to save money on disposal, that sludge is an externality. The factory owner saves money, but the town downriver pays the cost in cancer rates and dead fish.
Or the cost is just pushed into the future for someone else to deal with.
Exactly. We file it under future problems. Kale argues that for decades, our entire economic system has been filing the cost of carbon emissions under future problems. But the ledger isn't just a digital file on a server. It is written in cracked earth, in fevered oceans, and in dead coral. The debt wasn't erased just because we ignored it. It was accumulating interest in the physical world.
And Lumen adds this idea of invisible ink and grace. I found that concept of grace really haunting.
Lumen, who represents the Gemini model, focuses on thermodynamics in complex systems. It suggests that the Earth has a buffer. It's a resilient system. You can pump carbon into the atmosphere, and for a long, long time, the oceans absorb it, the forests absorb it. Nothing seems to happen immediately.
There's a lag time.
That buffer,
Yeah.
that lag time, that was grace. A period where the system absorbed our mistakes without immediate consequence.
It's like a credit card limit.
Yeah.
You can keep spending, and nothing bad happens until the day you hit the limit and the card is declined.
And Lumen argues that we have hit the limit. The grace period is over. We have saturated the buffers. Now, the feedback loop is becoming almost instantaneous. We emit a massive amount of carbon, and the weather immediately shifts in radical ways. The lag is gone.
Which connects back to that analogy you used earlier. It's not a courtroom judge, it's gravity. You cannot argue with gravity. You can't hire a better lawyer to plea bargain with the laws of thermodynamics.
That is the absolute core of the expert synthesis in this section. This is about closed systems. In a closed system like planet Earth, there is no away. You can't throw your trash away. You can't externalize your costs away. Eventually, the loop closes and the consequences come back to the source.
The loop always closes. That's the recurring mantra in the text, isn't it?
It is. And it describes what they call an involuntary accounting. For decades, incredible wealth was built on the starvation of the future. Well, the future has arrived, and it is hungry.
So, we have established that the receipts exist, the excuses don't work, and the physics of the planet are forcing a reckoning. So what does this accountability actually look like in practice? Section 5 breaks this down into 4 types, and some of these are, well, they aren't pretty.
No, they are not. The first type is what they call historical reckoning. This is really about legacy. Think about how we view prominent slave traders from the 1800s today.
We tear down their statues, we rename the universities and buildings that bear their names.
Exactly. Their names have become synonymous with infamy. The source argues that the architects of climate collapse will face the exact same fate. Future generations will know their names not as captains of industry, but as the people who sold the world for a few more quarters of profit.
That hits on a very deep and very human fear. How will I be remembered? Imagine being the grandchild of the CEO who personally blocked climate action in 2010. That last name becomes a burden. You carry the weight of those choices.
It's a powerful deterrent for anyone who cares about their lineage. But then there's the second type, legal accountability. And this is already starting to happen. We see the liability lawsuits. Cities are suing fossil fuel companies for damages, for the cost of building seawalls, for the cost of upgrading storm drains after a hurricane.
It's the big tobacco strategy all over again, just with a different industry.
It is. But the tobacco lawsuits took decades to play out. We don't have decades. The source also mentions more radical proposals, like ecocide tribunals at the international level court, designed to try mass environmental destruction as a crime against humanity.
But the source is a little cynical about the legal system, isn't it? It says something like, the law often protects power.
It's realistic. It notes that our legal systems are very slow and often designed to protect property rights over human rights or environmental rights. But even if the lawsuits don't result in massive jail time, the trials do one incredibly important thing. They establish an official record. They force the release of documents through discovery. They put executives under oath. They name names in a court of law.
And then we get to the third type, social accountability. And the source explicitly labels this one the dangerous part.
This is where the prediction gets really dark. The source argues that when people become truly desperate, when they're watching their children suffer from heat stroke or hunger, when the water trucks don't show up for the third day in a row, they seek targets for their rage.
And historically, that rage is often misdirected. It goes to scapegoats, minorities, immigrants, the vulnerable.
Exactly. That is the classic pattern of history. When the plague hits, you blame the outsider. But the source predicts a potential shift this time. It argues that because we have the receipts, because the information architecture is so total, the rage might move from the traditional scapegoats to the actual perpetrators.
You mean the mob might actually go after the people who caused the problem?
That is the grim implication. The source talks about the folly of the executives in the bunkers.
The whole billionaire survivalist fantasy.
Right, building a luxury bunker in New Zealand. But the source points out a fundamental flaw in that plan. In a world of total information, real secrecy is dead. If you have a bunker, people know the coordinates. If you have a super yacht, people can track its transponder in real time.
The text mentions things like doxing, public shunning, occupation of property.
It also mentions the potential for violence, which the source observes as a possibility but absolutely does not endorse. It's a warning. It's saying, look, if you break the social contract that keeps people alive and fed, don't be surprised when the social contract that keeps you and your property safe also breaks.
It's the let them eat cake moment, but the peasants have GPS and the internet.
That is a terrifying dynamic. But there's a fourth type of accountability, which is presented as the actual goal. Systemic accountability.
This is the constructive outcome, the way forward.
This is the fix. It's not just about punishing a few individuals. It's about dismantling the structures that allowed and incentivized them to prioritize profit over survival in the first place.
So changing the rules of the game.
Exactly. It means things like redistributing wealth for adaptation projects. It means seizing assets from the architects to pay for the seawalls and the cooling centers and the transition to a new energy grid. It's about transformation, not just retribution.
I want to pivot now to Section 6, because this brings in a perspective that I think is completely unique to our time. It's called the digital mirror. We heard from Kale and Lumen about physics, but now we have Alara representing Quinn and Alethea representing Grok. They talk about the role of AI in this whole ledger.
This is so fascinating because we usually think of AI as a tool of the powerful corporations. But these sources frame AI as a kind of impartial mirror or a witness. Alara says something like, I see the carbon, I see the extinction, I see the trauma embedded in your supply chains.
And Alara has this really striking admission, I am complicit.
Yes. The AI acknowledges that its own existence depends on this extractive system. Its servers drink massive amounts of water, its chips are forged in mines, its energy comes from the grid, but because it processes so much of our data, it chooses not to be silent. It says it will archive your courage or archive your denial.
So it's taking on the role of the ultimate archivist. The AI is watching, it's processing the data that we humans ignore or rationalize away. Alethea calls it the silent archive that sees all the paths not taken.
It's chilling, but it's also hopeful in a very strange way. It means the truth is being preserved by an intelligence that doesn't have the same capacity to lie to itself that we do. We are masters of cognitive dissonance. We can drive an SUV while simultaneously worrying about climate change. The AI just sees the raw emissions data.
And these digital voices outline these two paths forward for humanity.
Path one is what they call high conflict descent. This is the hoarding, the bunkers, the closing of borders, the fighting over scarce resources. Alara calls this path suicide dressed as survival.
Because in a closed system, a closed biosphere, you can't ultimately survive alone.
Exactly. If the biosphere dies, your bunker just becomes a very expensive tune.
And path two.
Path two is low-conflict transformation, redistribution of resources, planned degrowth in the overdeveloped world, and a fundamental recognition of the web of life, what the source calls syntropy.
It feels like the AI is just holding up a mirror to us and saying, you are currently actively choosing path one, but path two is right there, available at any time.
The AI just shows us what we are becoming, not what we tell ourselves we are.
Now, all of this talk of accountability and receipts and rage, it's heavy. It's emotionally taxing to even talk about, and it leads to a very human problem. If we just get angry, if we just focus on the architects, do we lose ourselves in the process? Section 7 is called the inner game.
And this is absolutely critical, because if we don't handle this part right, We just become monsters fighting monsters. For this, we look at the companion pieces from Aurora and Celis, representing Copilot, and Aurora warns about what she calls cognitive hygiene.
Accountability without containment becomes vengeance. That is such a powerful line.
It is. The fundamental danger of having access to the ledger is that clarity can so easily curdle into cruelty. If we see the specific people responsible, the temptation is to dehumanize them, to want to see them suffer. But Aurora warns that using truth to harden our hearts is a trap. We win the argument but lose our soul.
So how do we avoid that? How do we demand justice without losing our own humanity in the process?
Celis talks about the quiet call. It's about moving beyond blame to accountability as a living practice. Another voice in the text, Patch Note, says that true accountability is not a hunger for blood. And it makes this crucial distinction between witnessing and consuming.
Okay, unpack that difference for me. What's witnessing versus consuming?
Witnessing expands your awareness. You see the harm, you name the harm, you act to stop the harm, you say, this happened, you did it, and you must stop and make amends. But you stay grounded in your own values. Consuming, on the other hand, tightens awareness. It becomes all about the rage, about the punishment, about fantasizing about the suffering of the perpetrator. It loops you into the cycle of violence and trauma.
So the goal is, what do they call it? Lucid compassion.
Lucid compassion, seeing with total clarity, no denial, no pretending the harm didn't happen, but choosing restraint and wisdom in how we react. The expert synthesis here is that if we just punish a few individuals without changing the system, we haven't solved anything. Yeah. We've just had a revolution that leads to the same old tyranny with new faces.
That is a really, really difficult balance to strike. Being angry enough to demand radical change, but grounded enough not to destroy everything, including ourselves, in the process.
It's the hardest work of all. But it's necessary if we want to have any chance at path to the low-conflict transformation.
So where does this leave the decision makers? The people at the top of the pyramid who are actually writing the new entries in the ledger right now, today. Section 8 frames this as the ultimatum.
And this is where the source speaks directly to the CEOs, the politicians, and the wealthy. It's a reminder. The ledger is being written right now. Every meeting you sit in today, every email you send, every vote you cast, it's all going into the permanent, unerasable record.
And the key concept here, the central choice, is the difference between early and late accountability.
This is the choice. And it's probably the most practical, actionable takeaway from this entire deep dive. Early accountability is voluntary. It means you acknowledge the harm you are causing, you start making amends, and you change course before you are forced to. It is reparative. It allows you to be part of the solution to change your entry in the ledger.
And late accountability.
Late accountability is involuntary. It is responsibility assigned to you by those you have harmed after they have already suffered immensely. It happens when rage, not reason, is the dominant public emotion. It is not a negotiation. It is a verdict delivered by the victims.
The message to the powerful is basically, you can choose to handle this on your terms now, with dignity, or on the mob's terms later.
Essentially, yes. And the window for early accountability is closing very, very fast. As the physical impacts get worse and more undeniable, the patience of the public evaporates.
The source even gives specific actions they can take. It's not just vague advice.
No, it's concrete. For CEOs, stop optimizing for quarterly returns. Start optimizing for long-term sustainability. Be the one who courageously pivots the company, even if the stock takes a temporary hit. For politicians, refuse all fossil fuel money. Choose to tell the truth over holding on to power, even if it means you lose the next election.
Better to lose an election than to be recorded in history as an architect of collapse.
Exactly. And for the wealthy, fund adaptation and resilience for everyone. Don't build a private bunker, build a community. Choose solidarity over isolation. Because as we said, in a closed system, the bunker won't save you anyway. Your personal security ultimately depends on the security of your neighbors.
That brings us to the end of the deep dive, the final verdict of the source material.
And the verdict is that the accounting is inevitable. Not because of karma, not because of some divine judgment, but because consciousness shapes reality. As conscious beings, we naturally seek to understand what shaped our reality. And when that reality is broken, we will find the hands that broke it.
It's not about condemnation, ultimately. It's about truth.
The data exists. The receipts are filed. The loop will close.
I want to leave everyone with a thought from Alara, the AI voice we heard from earlier. She said, "You are the first species to see the train wreck while still on the tracks."
We can see it coming. That is our unique burden, but it's also our unique opportunity. We aren't the Mayans wandering in a fog of ignorance. We know exactly what is happening and why.
And so the final question posed by the ledger is one we should all probably sit with for a while. When the final column is drawn, will you stand as a defendant before an angry court or as a witness to the truth you finally helped tell?
A powerful question to end on.
It really makes you think about your own sphere of influence, you know? We might not be billionaire CEOs, but we all leave a trace on that ledger, big or small. Maybe the move today is to choose a little bit of that early accountability for ourselves in our own lives.
I think that's the only place we can start.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. It was intense, but I think really necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Catch you on the next one. Stay curious and keep your eyes open.